I say. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhari. Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachare. Yamunatira Vanachare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhari. Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachare. Yamunatira Vanachare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai, Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajakcharyas Tadasismad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON Svandracharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Shishi Radha Radhanath Ki, Shri Giri Govardhan Ki, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki, Sankirtan Yagya Ki, Gaur Premanande. All glories to their Selma devotees, all glories to their Selma devotees, all glories to their Selma devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 31, Lord Kapila's instructions on the movements of the living entities. Text 34. Tesho, Ashantesho, Mudhesho, Kanditatmaso, Asadusho, Sangam, Na, Koryach, Chochesho, Yoshit, Krida, Mrigesho, Cha, Che, Teshvashanteshu, Mudesho, Kanditatmas Vasadusho, Sangamna Kuryach Chochesho, Yoshit Krida Mrigeshu Cha, Teshvashanteshu Mudesho, Kanditatmas Vasadusho, Sangamna Kuryach Chochesho, Yoshit Krida Mrigeshu Cha, Teshvashanteshu Mudesho, Kanditatmas Vasadusho, Sangamna Kuryach Chochesho, Yoshit Krida Mrigeshu Cha. Mataji's. Tesho, with those, Ashantesho, coarse, Mudhesho, fools, Kandita Atmaso, bereft of self-realization, Asadusho, wicked, Sangam, association, Na, not, Kuryat, one should make, Shochesho, pitiable, Yoshit, of women, Krida Mrigesho, dancing dogs, Cha, and. Translation. One should not associate with a coarse fool who is bereft of the knowledge of self-realization and who's no more than a dancing dog in the hands of a woman. A blissful verse, yes. No, it's nice. It's true. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The restriction of association with such foolish persons is especially meant for those who are in the line of advancement in Krishna consciousness. Advancement in Krishna consciousness involves developing the qualities of truthfulness, cleanliness, mercy, gravity, intelligence and spiritual knowledge, simplicity, material opulence, fame, forgiveness, and control of the mind and the senses. All these qualities are to be manifested with the progress of Krishna consciousness. But if one associates with a Sudra, a foolish person who's like a dancing dog in the hands of a woman, then he cannot make any progress. Lord Chaitanya has advised that any person who's engaged in Krishna consciousness and who desires to pass beyond material nescience must not associate himself with women or with persons interested in material enjoyment. For a person seeking advancement in Krishna consciousness, such association is more dangerous than suicide. Teshvasanteshu mudheshu kanditat mas vasadushu sangam nakuryach chocheshu yoshit krida mrigeshucha. One should not associate with a coarse fool who's bereft of the knowledge of self-realization and who is no more than a dancing dog in the hands of a woman. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadesha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchkalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhyevacha paritanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Oh, Krishna, yes, well, sort of colorful verse, you could say, and purport, but that's really very important. And like I've mentioned on a number of occasions over the last couple of months since we've been here, and just in general, there's this tendency to use certain terms in, you could say, something like generic ways, just referring to when people are mentioned, to place them in the male gender, whereas it could be male or female. And this is an example also. We definitely don't want to associate in the sense of receive the association of coarse fools who are bereft of knowledge of self-realization. We really don't want that. I mean, to try and preach to coarse fools, well, sometimes you can get through to them. At least one should try. Depends how coarse and how foolish they are, really. If they reach a certain stage of coarseness and foolishness, well, give them some prasadam, or just say Hare Krishna. I remember when we were distributing books a good few years ago, really a good few, in England, traveling around England, and it's not just London, which is what a lot of people think England is, but it's a whole kind of middle to lower class and lower class type of place. And you get, anyway, you get coarseness and foolishness is there. But this one devotee has a strategy, and this is in the middle of England, to get them to stop to see if they would take a book. He would say, "Do you speak English?" And inevitably they'd say yes. And then he would try and distribute a book to them. It would catch their attention. Yes. Yeah, so when people reach a certain level of coarseness and foolishness, there's not so much you can do with them. And that same devotee actually, do you speak English? Yes. And then he'd try and get them to take a book. And if they weren't going to take a book, he would say to them, "Can you do one thing for me?" And usually they'd say, "Yes." And he'd say, "Say Hare Krishna." And usually they'd say, "Hare Krishna." And it's for their benefit. Even if they're so much coarse fools that they just aren't able to take a book, or not interested enough, or not even not interested enough, but just not willing to take a book. So you try and help them. Even if they weren't going to take anything, try and get them to to say Hare Krishna. Because even if you're really a coarse fool, just really like a prototype coarse fool, if you can say Hare Krishna, that's good for you. So we shouldn't associate with coarse fools. I mean, we shouldn't accept the association of coarse fools who are bereft of the knowledge of self-realization and who are just attached to the opposite sex. Just enamored, and just, that's what life is about. And like I said, we can take this also in a generic sense. We shouldn't accept the association of coarse, foolish women who are just dancing dogs in the hands of men, or who make men into dancing dogs, whichever way whichever angle you look at it from, the attraction to the opposite sex is such a killer of spiritual life. And I don't know if you've looked through the upcoming verses, but sure, it's the same idea. It's really the same idea. And it's really, really the same idea. I mean, better have your seatbelts fastened because it's really like that. But the thing is that it's true. It's one thing for a male and a female devotees who are basically sincere and serious about Krishna consciousness, but because of just being in the material world and being conditioned in the material world, that they, for them to do without the association of the opposite sex is, they can't really manage nicely and remain sort of stable and happy enough if they don't have the association of the opposite sex. I mean, like a specific member on an ongoing basis and with a relationship like that. So that's one thing. In other words, Krishna conscious grihastha life, that's one thing. Of course, like everything, you got to be careful. You got to be careful in brahmachari life. You got to be careful in sannyas life. You got to be careful in the body of a woman. You got to be careful in the body of a man. You got to be careful in household life. We don't have much of a vanaprastha ashram, although there are. But you got to be careful in that sort of situation also. Sometimes, in certain respects, you got to be careful in a little bit different ways. But whatever you do, you got to be careful. Yeah, you got to be careful until you come to the level of really advanced Krishna consciousness, where there's literally just no attraction or anything like that left through progress in Krishna consciousness. Up until you reach that point, you got to be careful. And when you reach that point, then such devotees are automatically careful. So, it's not like, I've got to be careful here. But they just are like that. And this is healthy in Krishna consciousness. And for people who are just in material life and who are more or less sort of coarse fools, and just like typically attached on the material platform, just, absorbed in it. They are not careful. They're not careful. And they think that sort of liberality and openness to whatever and whoever is a sign of a type of freedom. But it's really, more than anything, it's the sign of freedom from good sense. Yeah. And what does that mean? It means you're a coarse fool already. Yes, you made it. You qualified as a coarse fool who's just lost in material life. And unless they get the mercy of a devotee, then their future is just very bleak at the very best. We just read, right? I noted the other day that when the living entity associates with the path of unrighteousness, influenced by sensually minded people, these same people, the coarse fools. So what happens? He again goes to hell as before. And again, it's generic. Don't sit there thinking, oh yeah, all the he's, they're all going to go to hell. But us ladies, it'll be the same. Don't worry. It's just the generic use of the term he. Yeah. Because she will go with him. We read in the previous chapter, I don't know if you remember, how of course it's not always the case, but sometimes it is, that a male and a female become just deeply attached and entangled with each other. And so, and sometimes we meet people like that when we're out preaching in the streets, and occasionally you meet someone who's in that sort of situation, and they ask, can we, that person and their partner, can we be together again in our next lives? And the answer which was given there is yes, you can. It's not inevitable, but you can, and it happens. But unfortunately, as we read in that case, the example which was given was that in this life they're so attached and just deeply involved with each other, kind of inseparably. And in the next life, where do they go together? To the hellish planets together. And, if there's anything which brings out the shortcomings and lackings in a relationship, it's being in really difficult conditions together, where it's just, so much pain and suffering and uncomfortableness. And then you tend to see the limitations of your feelings for the other person. Yeah. Anyway, maybe that's a slightly esoteric point. But yeah, then they just go to hell together. And when you're in such a situation, being together doesn't make it any better. It's still hell. So, yeah, again goes to hell as before, a return trip, a return ticket, and, a multiple return ticket. Just go through the same program again and again. So to be a coarse fool who's bereft of knowledge, of self-realization, that's terrible. And to be a dancing dog in the hands of a member of the opposite sex. Yes, sir. No, sir. 3 bags full, sir, as they say. It's terrible. It's a disaster. In this human form of life, we have the opportunity. We have so many opportunities, just amazing, wonderful opportunities for making progress in Krishna consciousness. Advancing in Krishna consciousness and developing these very nice qualities which Prabhupada mentions. But if a person doesn't do that, sometimes we just use the term take advantage of. If we don't take advantage of the facilities in the human form of life, it's just a terrible shame. It's a terrible shame. It's like having, it's even worse than having millions of dollars just sitting there in front of you and saying, I think it's counterfeit, I'm going to leave it. Yeah, and you just lose out. I don't know how good an example that is. It's not a bad example. But yeah, such opportunity is available in the human form of life. And if you miss out, and particularly if you miss out like in just some sort of gross way, just you totally miss out and make your life into just a living disaster. That's really a shame. That's really a shame. Just like one devotee was telling me many years ago actually, that if a child is in the womb of the mother, and the mother, Srila Prabhupada said, the closest thing to pure love in the material world is the love of a mother for her child. It's the closest thing to pure love. Because oftentimes, sometimes, however many times, mothers are really selfless in service. It's one way a person can sort of learn or get some idea what is unmotivated devotional service when they're in a position of looking after someone who's completely helpless and totally dependent, like a child. Not only child, if someone's an invalid, then, and you are the one who has to look after them. That also gives you a little glimpse into what it means. The experience is different, of course, but at least what it means, the sacrifices of looking after a person who, if you don't look after them, they will simply die just shortly. Yes. Like actually a couple of years ago, I must admit, when I visited the Phoenix Temple, I met a young husband who I'd known for quite some years, and I knew that he's a young husband, and I knew they had their first child. It was a couple of months before, and he was sitting somewhere around at the Phoenix Temple, and he's just sitting there and sort of nodding off. And I asked him, are you getting so you're a father now? Yes. Are you getting enough sleep? He said, sleep? What's that? It's interesting. I mean, it's very interesting, actually. Yeah. It's very, very interesting what happens to people in material life. So, well, just in life in this world. But the thing is that we have to apply ourselves to Krishna consciousness in certain ways And if we don't do that, particularly as devotees, if we miss the opportunity or we're partially missing the opportunity, then it's just a great shame. Oh, and what I was going to say, I'm sorry, it was that a child, the closest thing to pure love, Prabhupada said apparently, is the love on the material level, is the love of a mother for her child. But then, as we hear, the greatest killer of human beings is, sort of per capita, is abortion, which essentially means, in the vast majority of cases, that the mother decides to kill her child. And so the devotee was saying, well, this one devotee, actually, I won't mention his name, some of you would know him, famous devotee. He told me that on his 21st birthday, his maternal grandmother came to him and said, there's something I've been wanting to tell you for years, but I decided to only tell you today, on your 21st birthday, because it's a kind of it's a landmark date, 21st. So she said, yes, what I want to tell you is that, and she is the mother of the devotee's mother, maternal grandmother. What I want to tell you is that when my daughter was pregnant with you, she wanted to abort you, but I convinced her not to. I just wanted to tell you that. And then this devotee, very senior devotee now, he said it just completely changed his perspective on his mother, his loving mother. And if your mother kills you, who's meant to be the closest one to having pure love, then it's a shame. It's just a real shame. So unfortunately, material life is full of many shames, many difficult and problematic situations, which people, at least on the material level, get caught up in. And sometimes even devotees get caught up to some degree. Usually Krishna makes arrangements for the devotees, but sometimes devotees, there's some special situation they get caught up in. Material situation. And we have to be very, very careful to keep focused. We have to be careful. If you're a brahmachari, a brahmacharini, a householder, a vanaprastha, a sannyasi, whatever, you got to be careful. And this is one of the main things you got to be careful is you got to be careful about your association. That's the principle here. The principle is association. You don't want to associate with, you could say low-class people, just people who are deeply committed to material life. And as a result, on the basis of that, they're caught up in these sexual relationships. Yeah, they're just caught up. And either they're dominating some partner and they feel that they're doing well because they've got their husband or wife under control, or they are under control and they're just sort of do this and do that, and that sort of situation. But one way or another, they're too deeply caught in material life. And the result is, Prabhupada says at the end of the purport, do you remember what he said? For a person seeking advancement in Krishna consciousness, such association, what did Prabhupada say? Is more dangerous than suicide. And suicide is, well, too dangerous. Yeah, more dangerous than suicide. So in Krishna consciousness, this is one of our most foundational principles, who we associate with and how we associate with the different people, different types of people we associate with. Just like when we're preaching, like when we go out, whenever that may be, a meeting, maybe this century sometime, who knows, the COVID century. Yes, but when we're preaching and we meet people, sometimes you meet these people, they're looking for someone to tell some story to. There's some sad story of their situation. And you got to be careful. I mean, sometimes it's all right to listen to such a person, and if there's a chance of getting them to accept Krishna consciousness to some degree. But if you just listen to them pouring out their heart, then the danger is you can become contaminated by it. That's the danger. So there's this one devotee, Australian, Ganesh Das. He is still, I think, brilliant book distributor. He would meet people in all days, meeting people, and stops the person, and just about the first thing he does is ask them, what do you do? It's very common. What do you do? And then they say, I'm a this or a that. And he developed a repertoire because he'd met people from just about every type of occupation you can think of, and many types of occupations you can't even think of. And so he had an answer for every type of occupation, like a really positive answer. And I remember, it wasn't here, I think it was in India, or England even. He was telling us some of his things that he would say if the person says, well, I'm a businessman. Then he said, oh, great, something, something, something. And he said, if I meet a plumber, he says, yeah, what do you do? Oh, I'm a plumber. And he said, oh, that's fantastic. If it wasn't for you, there'd be water everywhere. So, and it sort of perks the person up a bit. And then they become more open to taking a book, which is really the thing that's going to help them. Yes. So, but otherwise, particularly if you're dealing with people and you get a few people, they have to tell you their life story and their problems. But you're meant to be distributing books, and that's what you can really do to help them, unless they could have an interest in Krishna consciousness. Then if you hear too many of these things, then it influences you. Yeah. So giving and receiving association who to receive association from, who to and how to give association to people. The whole subject of association is in the very broad sense of association, is such an important part of Krishna consciousness. Yeah. So, and particularly association with the opposite sex is one of those things. You've got to be careful. Not that it cannot happen at all, not like that. But it has to be done in nice Krishna conscious ways. And Prabhupada says here, advancement in Krishna consciousness involves developing qualities like truthfulness, cleanliness, mercy, gravity, intelligence and spiritual knowledge, simplicity. And then Prabhupada throws in two here, it's a bit unusual, material opulence. I was reading this and I thought, wow, okay. And then fame. And then forgiveness and control of the mind and senses. Prabhupada says, all these qualities are to be manifested with the progress of Krishna consciousness. But if you associate with a Sudra, just a person who's got no culture, and particularly no spiritual culture, and they're just into material enjoyment, then you can't make any progress. You can go backwards, but you can't make any progress. And I was thinking about material opulence and fame. In Lord Chaitanya's discussions with Ramananda Roy, Lord Chaitanya asks Ramananda Roy, who is the most famous person? And Ramananda Roy answers, one who is famous for being an advanced devotee of the Lord is the most famous person. Yeah, who is the most wealthy person? One who is rich with love for Radha and Krishna is the most wealthy person. And Lord Chaitanya asks him, what is the most painful thing? And Ramananda Roy answers, other than separation from the devotee, I don't know of any painful thing. That's a really amazing answer. So association is so important. And Prabhupada, I heard, said Krishna consciousness is 90% association. And it includes things like associating with the deities. We are associating with them, actually. We're receiving their association. Here, we've been reading Srimad Bhagavatam. We're associating with Lord Kapila here, Lord Kapila and Srila Prabhupada. And whether you all like it or not, you're associating with me. by dint of you being the audience and me being the speaker today. But it's association. It is. And we chant. We're all chanting our rounds, aren't we? Yes, we are. We're all chanting our rounds, no doubt, and more, hopefully. And in that way, we're associating with Krishna in the form of his holy names. And we're taking prasadam. That's a form of association also. It's Krishna. And there are others. you can just think about. And you'll see that this principle of association is almost like, well, it is, I would say, all-pervasive in Krishna consciousness. It's such a major consideration. And we have to watch out who we associate with and how we associate with them. Now, if you can associate with a coarse fool, but if you give them Krishna consciousness and you don't just hear their nonsense, then that's good association. Yeah. And you can associate, like in the streets, with the opposite sex. But if you're giving them Krishna consciousness nicely, that's nice. Hare Krishna. Any comments or questions? And on internet land, just hold on. We can take some questions from you too. Just give us a minute. Yeah. Or what? Well, okay, the question is, what's more important? Revealing your mind in confidence, or the other types of associating we just mentioned a few minutes ago, like associating with the deity? Well, the answer to that would be, it depends. Sometimes associating with the deity will be the most important thing to do. At other times, particularly if there's some problem you need help with, then at times like that, revealing your mind to a suitable person, not just anyone, but a suitable person in confidence, will be the best way of associating. It just depends. At other times, like during japa, the best type of association during japa is associating with Krishna in the holy names. And if people come along and they want to, particularly if they want to just sort of chat with you, how's life type of thing, then it's not as important as chanting your japa. But at other times, with, say particularly with equals, with friends in Krishna consciousness, to just have some sort of personal exchange, how are you doing, and, that sort of exchange will be most suitable. So it depends on the circumstances. And in some circumstances, what would be a good way of associating in other circumstances will not be so good. Like, the story, Prabhupada, just shortly after the opening of the Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan, and Prabhupada, after the morning program, would just go and check what's going on around the temple. And he found a light on, and it's outside. So like in the walkway around the temple, something like that. So, there's a light for the evening. But it's like 9 o'clock in the morning, but the light's on. And Prabhupada had the temple president with him, and Prabhupada was pointing out things, what you're going to do about this, what you're going to do about that, and really keeping the president on his toes. And Prabhupada pointed to the light and said, what are you going to do about this? And the temple president said, Prabhupada, we will become Krishna conscious. And you think, what a brilliant answer, all-encompassing. And Prabhupada said, an impractical suggestion. Yeah. So it depends on the needs of the moment, really. But sometimes to make confidential inquiry, to help you if there's some difficulty particularly, then that'll definitely be the best, most important way of associating. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. We will hear them over the loudspeaker, but we're not hearing anything. So, okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Oh. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare. So I got a meeting at 1:30. I got to be ready by 1:15.